Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming and sitting in for this session, and I hope that as we spend a little time together, we can encourage each other on this theme of accountability and find some gains on the journey. Now, the little cartoon that's up there, I am entertained by that cartoon. A couple of blokes at the back of the boat saying, "Sure glad the hole is not at our end. Long as the problem's down there, I'm sure we'll be fine." But you don't need to meditate long to realize the problem that is pending. A fellow by the name of Lewin put this formula together for behavioral reflection. He suggests that behavior is a function of both the person and the environment. When you're trying to figure out why is someone behaving that way, it's a function of two things, not one. It's a function of that person and what they're thinking and what their character is and what the influences are on their life and what the thought processes are in their mind. It's a function of that person plus the environment. What is going on around that person? What is the context of the environment in which they're trying to lead or trying to follow? What is the health of that environment? And when we think about accountability, as we do this morning, it is these two dimensions. I'm going to be inviting you to think about your most significant accountable relationship. Accountability works in two directions for every one of us who are leaders in the church. We have accountability upward to somebody or some group, and then we have people who are accountable to us in the context of our leadership. If you have nobody accountable to you, then you're not a leader. Accountability is about, it envelopes this journey of leadership. And if you are not accountable to anybody, welcome to this seminar. I hope you will be so by the end of it. Accountability is actually a gift. It's actually a wonderful thing when we try to travel in community. And it's a way of thinking through some of these issues around the person and the environment. What's going on in me, what's going on around me for this to work, for this to align, for us to go forward. I'd like you to take just a moment and reflect and maybe chat with someone close to you. The four blokes in the boat. The two blokes up at the end who are saying, "Glad the hole's down at the other end." To whom are they accountable? And what's the environment that's going on? And why would it be that they could hold that point of view? They're about to get some feedback to tell them that their point of view is very wrong. They're about to get some very direct and very destructive feedback. How is it possible that they could hold that point of view? Now, it's not just an artificial exercise. I've been in church settings where there are people who behave in exactly this way. I'm glad that that's not our problem, when in fact, from a different vantage point, you can see that the whole ship is about to go down. What do you think is going on in this situation as regards their thought patterns? And it's artificial in this beautiful picture, so we can discuss it at arm's length. What's going on? Have a chat with your neighbor, and just a moment or two, what could they possibly be thinking to make a statement like that? Have a chat. Okay, let's have a little feedback, a little reflection. What could they possibly be thinking to make a statement like that? What do you reckon? Yes. Thinking about themselves, thinking that I don't want to get down there and get wet and get dirty and get sweaty and get involved in all that. I'll just stay up here at this end of the boat. What else could they possibly be thinking to make such an inane statement? Yes.
It could have started at the little hole down the bottom that
It was a little hole, it's been a little hole for a long while, and they have become docile to the fact that the boat is upended and that they're several feet up in the air, and it's just all kind of happened slowly, and they're not responding to it. Yeah, what else could they be thinking? Absolutely true. What else could they be thinking? Any other thoughts? Not our responsibility. It's not up to us. Now, that kind of goes to some interesting questions of accountability and reflection and environment. Clearly, the thing they are missing is the environmental, the big system view. Because what we all know, and why this becomes a joke, is that they cannot have the perspective that they have and survive. Something is going to happen. But they don't see it. They do not have an awareness of that wider environment. Let me ask this question. To whom are the blokes up at the far end of the boat accountable? To whom are they accountable? You'd like to think they were accountable to the other blokes in the boat. Exactly right. They're also accountable to gravity and the principles of water and the principles of flotation or lack thereof, the principles that govern holes in boats. We'd like to think that they're accountable to some character, some self-accountability, something within themselves that would be driving some behavioral responses as well. If they were accountable to the other blokes in the boat, would their actions be different? They'd definitely be different, wouldn't they? And so this is a couple of blokes up at the back of the boat who don't see themselves accountable to anybody. That's my thesis. They're not exercising any sense of accountable behavior because they are looking at the situation and saying, it's too hard, or it doesn't involve me, or I'm not going to opt in. What I'd really like if I were in the boat on any end of that spectrum is for a sense of accountability to one another and a sense of accountability to the realities that we are facing. I want to suggest to us that accountability is the simple business of figuring out to whom or what am I answerable and for what am I responsible. That's what accountability is. It's as simple as that. Who am I answering to and what am I responsible for? And when I don't know who I am answering to, or I choose not to know, when I don't know who I'm meant to go to when I face a challenge, or who recruited me into this job so that I can go and tell them, it's tough, I need some help. When I don't know who I'm answerable to, it gets really difficult to function, yes? And even in this scenario with the boat, part of what makes it fascinating is when you're accountable to everybody in the boat, you can play the game of hiding up at the other end. If this boat had a captain, if there was some one person on this team who had been given the responsibility by the group to actually get them across the water safely, a scenario like this would be much less likely to happen, yes? There would be some challenge, some charge, some conversation, somebody overboard if we don't get together here and work this out. There would be consequences before we drown. And it's in that context that I want us to think about accountability. It's about working through the consequences on the journey before we sink the ship, before it sinks all of us. I want you to think about your most accountable relationship. So for me, as a pastor of a local church, the one that I'm exploring and have been exploring as I've been preparing this material and have taken some actions as a result of what I'm teaching you today, is my accountability to the Church Council of New Hope Baptist Church through our chairperson, Richard. So Richard is the chair of a council of 7 elected people, elected from our membership, and that group of people are my boss. I am accountable to them. They are my oversight. And that's very clear in my world and very clear in our church. What is your significant upward accountability relationship? If you are an associate pastor, is it to the senior pastor? Are you accountable to a deacons group? To whom are you accountable? Why don't you take 2 minutes, turn to the person next to you, and just have a quick discussion. It may be just tell them. You might have to discuss that for a moment or two. And to whom are you accountable in your significant role? Okay. Anybody completely deadlocked, has no idea how to name somebody? Hopefully, as we progress, it'll help you. My guess is that those upward accountability relationships have varying degrees of health, of kind of steadiness around the room. And we could go around and hear different kinds of stories. I want you also to be thinking about people who are accountable to you, people who answer in the journey of church leadership to you, and just hold some of those accountable relationships in mind. Maybe some where there are challenges, maybe some where it's really working well, and as we talk about this material, maybe we can relate some of that to our very practical experiences. Let me take a moment and just reflect with us on some biblical insight, biblical reflections on this whole question of accountability. I find it most engaging to realize how profoundly accountable Jesus understood himself to be. Listen to John chapter 12, verse 49. I do not speak on my own, but the Father who sent me commanded me to say all that I have spoken. That is a pretty direct and strong statement of accountability. Again, in John 14, verse 31, Jesus explains what's about to happen as the last chapters of John unfold and Jesus' ministry unfolds. He says, all of this so that the world may learn that I love the Father and do exactly what my Father has commanded me. That is strong language. And preparing and reading this, I thought to myself, can I say that? I love the church council, and I do what the church council says I should do. Wow. There's something beautiful about those words. A love for the Father that makes accountability work. There's something beautiful about that image. I want it to exist in my family, where I want accountabilities to work in healthy, life-giving ways. I want it to work in the staff context. Wouldn't it be wonderful if people at New Hope said, I love Alan. I want to do what God has given him to do here in the church. Wouldn't that be awesome? I'm pretty sure that survey might not turn up 100%, but here is a biblical ideal. It's powerful. Jesus passed that on to the disciples. The same kind of framework exists as the disciples are mandated on their journey. They're chosen, appointed, commissioned, equipped people sent out to serve. John 15. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I call you friends. For everything that I learned from my Father, I have made known to you. You didn't choose me. I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit that will last, and so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. This is my command. Love one another. It's an amazing passage where Jesus speaks about the uniqueness of the relationship, gives them a mandate, and sends them. And as you read through the Gospels, through to the conclusion of each of the Gospels, you see this commissioning, this mandate, this authoritative invitation to be on mission together. Jesus commissions his disciples. He speaks of his authority being behind them, and he actually tells them, don't leave Jerusalem till you have my Spirit. He equips them, and he sends them on their way. We see the very similar dynamics in the life of Paul and Timothy. There's an accountable relationship, a mentor-mentoree relationship between them. And Paul is under orders from God, and he puts Timothy under a sense of mandate as they work together. In 1 Timothy chapter 1, Paul, an apostle of Christ Jesus, by the command of God, our Savior, and of Christ Jesus, our hope, to Timothy, my true son. So Paul actually describes himself as a man who's under the mandate of the living God. I am accountable to God, he says. And then he addresses Timothy as his son, and he goes on through the entire letter to urge him to do this, to command him to do that, to instruct him to do this. And it's a very rich letter full of instructives. I once read through 1st, 2nd Timothy and Titus when I was quite a young pastor, and I had the odd notion that maybe in those books I could learn how to be a pastor, because they were written by a leader in the church to pastors. It was one of the most shaping experiences of my life. I went through those books with a fine-toothed comb, read them 3 or 4 times, and wrote down on sheets of yellow paper everything that Paul instructed Timothy to do. What I was shocked by, as I did that exercise, is how different what Timothy was urged to do was from what I thought I was supposed to do. Not once did he tell him to count the offering and worry about it. Not once did he tell him to worry about this or that program in the church. But he constantly told him to be diligent about shaping the character of the people and the culture of the environment where he served and calling them to follow Jesus. And very instructive to read those books as a pastoral leader. There's this sense of accountability operating. Paul's accountable to God. Timothy is accountable through Paul for this journey and leadership in the church. I want you to just discuss with your neighbor for a moment, if you would. How does the sense of the relationship affect this discussion of accountability? So Jesus says, I didn't call you servant. I don't call you servants. I call you friends. Paul writes to Timothy. He calls him a son. How is accountability impacted by relationship? Have a bit of a conversation with your neighbor. Might share some of our ideas with one another as a group. How does relationship play into this conversation of accountability? What are your insights? Okay. So if the person who has the authority in this accountable relationship and is giving their authority, works hard on relationship, or maybe another way to put it is they are well positioned to work hard on the relationship, the person who has more authority. It's interesting, that's what we see in the whole gospel story, isn't it? God is working very hard on the relationship, investing everything in that relationship. Interesting insight. What else do you want to say about how relationship affects this whole thing of accountability? Yes. Mm, mm. If the relationship isn't good, it might shut down my sense of candor, my openness, my honesty. It might make the conversation narrow. Things that should be said don't get said. And it can, exactly right, play right into a challenging context. Anything else? Yes.
In regard to a servant, it's got to be a relationship with God. Revolutionise that while you want to commit yourself to being a bondservant.
There's something very powerful about if somebody is accountable to me, and I say, okay, you're my servant, let's get this thing done. It's not going to work. But if I say, it is such a privilege to work with you, and you are a friend to me, suddenly that person may want to be a servant in this context. And so there's something very powerful about how these relationships work. And when we take accountability as something that we are going to then use as a hammer, invariably it unwinds, doesn't it? It doesn't work. So we have here two examples in the scripture. Jesus saying to his disciples, I don't think of you as servants. I don't call you servants. I call you friends. Because I'm telling you everything that the Father has told me. I'm not just sending you on mission and saying, do what I say. I'm giving you the big vision. I'm helping you to understand what this is all about. Helping you to see as God sees. Helping you to know this journey as I know it in the Father. And that's a beautiful context and picture. Paul says to Timothy, you're my son. You're my son in the faith. And we could unpack that idea from other aspects of Scripture, which is very different from writing to him and saying, all right, you little character, I want you to serve me. I left you there, in Ephesus to straighten it out. What's wrong with you? I thought you'd have it done by now. Don't you understand that you're a servant of mine? It's just not very motivating, is it? And we see this modeling. So relationship is huge. It has to do with personal stuff. It has to do with the whole context. Yes. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. There's a clip on the back of this thing somewhere. Pardon me. If I just do this, it's going to be more comfortable for me. You can watch me dress for just a minute. Excuse me. There we go. I think we're good. There. If you are asked to be accountable to somebody and you do not respect that person, you do not like that person, you do not find that person a joy to be with, it will affect everything about this thing called accountability. I want to name that because those are the realities. And now as we push into this conversation, part of it's about owning those realities. And if you find yourself, if you're sitting here thinking, yep, that explains a lot. I do not like my boss. I do not like my oversight. I don't like the deacons. I don't like, my senior pastor. That's where you're going to have to work on this issue and sort some things through. Maybe some tools and some ideas and some opportunities will fall out of this. In a few moments, I'm going to give you a sheet of paper. I'm going to invite you to do an assessment of your most significant upward accountability relationship. I'm going to invite you to just name a few things and then reflect a little bit on how that is going for you and set a few actions of what you might do going forward. For some of you, it may be a very positive experience. For some of you, it may actually churn up a little a little angst, a little hurt, a little. And my prayer would be that this time next year, you're in a different place. I think these things move slowly. I think it takes time. But I think that there is possibility to be in wonderful, accountable relationships. Let me just comment on two other scriptures. So from Luke chapter 16, this is a parable that Jesus told about a dishonest steward. It's one of those intriguing New Testament stories of Jesus that I've read it many times, preached on it many times, and I'm still sure that I don't really know what it means. It is such an enigmatic, beautiful story. This steward, this servant, did the wrong thing. So the master called him in and asked him, "What is this I hear about you? Give an account," accountability, "give an account of your management, because you cannot be manager any longer." Then it tells a story about how he went out and thought, "I'm going to fix my boss." And he cut the prices on everything in the stock room, down to a minimum. He found the debtors. He reduced what they owed. He manipulated the environment to make people like him so that when he finally finished his job, he'd have some other people who might hire him. He'd be in good with them. And here's Jesus' last word. The people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of light. He goes on and says, use worldly wealth to acquire eternal friendships. It's this marvelous reflection that I'm not going to pretend to unwind and preach in its wholeness today, where Jesus is saying something about the way the world works in its wisdom, in its attentiveness, in its use of the stuff of life. And Jesus' application is, use the worldliness to serve God's eternal purposes. In that parable, there is this picture of accountability. And from a worldly perspective, people need to be accountable. People sometimes get fired. People need to be held accountable for the contexts in which they serve. And as believers, as followers after God, Jesus is challenging us to be accountable to God himself for the way that we use all of our resources to gain eternal benefit. It's even more clear in Hebrews chapter 13, where there's a charge to spiritual leaders. It says, have confidence in your leaders and submit to their authority, because they keep watch over you as those who must give an account. They're accountable. Leaders are accountable. All leaders are accountable. Accountable whether they know it or not, whether they want it or not, they must give an account. Do this so that their work will be a joy, not a burden, for that would be of no benefit to you. That's a great passage to roll out every once in a while and teach in your church context, because it's such a powerful truth. You need to pay attention to leadership, because leadership is meant to care for you, and leadership is going to give an account. And so this bold framework. All right. Anybody else with an insight, maybe a Bible passage that comes to mind, or some narrative from the scriptures that you think, hey, that's about accountability too? Anything else you want to add? Say again? Yes, say a little more. Yeah, and so when the relationship went bad, everything around it went bad, didn't it? Yeah. Any other insights? Absolutely. Right at the beginning, there's a clear calling and mandate, and this is what I want you to do, and there are consequences in that. And so we are created as accountable entities in God's universe. It's written right into the fabric. Gail? Mm-hmm. Exactly. So accountability is always this mutuality, isn't it? This two-way street. Accountability doesn't work if it's all me mandating and no sense of responding. It just nothing happens. So that's wonderful. Yes, Lucy. Yep. Mm. A very clear process, a very powerful process, and a very effective process for how to actually deal with when the relationship side isn't going well, because that and when if somebody hasn't done the right thing, because that's so critically important, and we are responsible to actually do something about it. This theme of accountability, responsible actions, being in relationships where we figure out how to be answerable, it runs all the way through the scriptures. It's everywhere. Yes? Yes, yeah, his sheep story. Yeah, a whole gentle, clever approach. Upward leadership. You know, how do you go tell your boss, that action stinks? That's a great story for reflecting on how you're going to do that. How you're going to go tell the person who has authority, and you're trying to be an accountable, friend, accountable son or daughter in all of this, but you're seeing something that's just not right. There's a need for that upward response as well, isn't there? What I want to return to now is the very simple definition of accountability as knowing who you're answerable to and what you're responsible for. And I want to take us for just a moment to, actually, one thing before we do that, this clever chart. When you think about accountability, there's a whole self thing involved here. And I like this little chart that helps us to reflect on accountable behaviors. Accountable behaviors are behaviors that recognize that, okay, it's happened, but now I'm going to behave in a way that moves things in a positive direction. So accountable behaviors are things like acknowledging the reality, yep, this is the way it is, embracing it, finding solutions, making something positive happen, as opposed to victim behaviors, which, we just wait and hope, I can't, a bunch of personal excuses, blame others, or just be totally unaware and choose to be unconscious of the challenges. And when we press into this accountability space, and I want to talk a bit about the accountability conversation, this all assumes that I'm going to embrace accountable behaviors and not slip to the victim posture. So one of the things I'd encourage you to just think about as you're thinking about that upward accountable relationship, and I'm going to invite you to do an assessment, are you inclined toward accountable behaviors yourself or victim behaviors? Because as soon as you slip into that space of victim behaviors, it's very debilitating. You know, I can't, I have no power here. I'm just going to be putting my head in the sand. I want to encourage you to think about accountable behaviors yourself. Now, remember I said at the beginning, behavior, according to Lewin, is a function of person and environment, of me and my character and my choices, and the system around me. So the accountable conversation that I'd like to invite us to reflect on is the conversation that kind of takes that into account and looks at how to actually move through some of those practical realities. So you've got this little loop on your chart, and we'll just reflect on it for a few moments. The place to begin an accountable relationship is recruiting somebody into some activity or some space, exploring the expectations and the resources to undertake this task. I used to think, in a naive sense of recruitment, as just inviting somebody to come help. Just come get on board here, and we'll work it out as we go. And that's a good formula for disaster. I now recognize that recruitment involves the inward arrow and the first two boxes on this cycle. Recruitment involves a conversation around expectations. And so the simple question, do you understand and accept what these expectations are? And then the conversations and agreement around resources. Do you have what is required to go forward and to succeed? Thinking about your most significant upward accountable relationship, can you answer the question, to whom am I answerable? And then, for what am I responsible? And if you actually find yourself kind of hanging a bit on that question, so I'm the senior pastor of New Hope Baptist Church. I know who I'm accountable to. I'm accountable to the council of this church. Do I know what I'm responsible for? Does the council know what I'm responsible for, and are we agreed about that? Have we actually nailed those expectations? Because if we haven't, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to go and do what I think. They're going to evaluate me on the basis of what they think, and then all hell's going to break loose. Because we'll get to a point around this chart, as I'll demonstrate in a moment, and we'll find that we're not aligned. So recruitment is really about, here's the expectation. Do you understand and do you accept what I am inviting you to, or we are inviting you to, or what this role requires that I'm recruiting you into to lead here in the church? And then the resourcing. Do you have what you require? Be thinking about that for your own upward accountable relationship. Accountability can be defined in some broad areas. So I am answerable to the church council. I am responsible for the preaching, teaching ministries here at New Hope. I'm responsible for the leadership, development, and nurture. I'm responsible for the vision discernment and vision casting. And I am responsible to build a healthy culture here at New Hope. That's my responsibility. 1,000 details, but that's the big kind of envelope of what I'm accountable to do. I am trustworthy as a believer, and I am liable in the country of Australia. So the other two little dot points there, I'm answerable to, I'm responsible for. I'm trustworthy as goes to the place of character. It goes to the place of relationship. And I need to be trustworthy as a believer in Jesus Christ. And there's some tacit agreements around that with my council, what that means. That's why we sign a code of ethics as Baptist pastors. That's our trustworthiness as a Baptist pastor. I need to be trustworthy as a servant in this union. And then there's liability. That's an aspect of the accountability journey. I need to understand that I'm actually accountable and answerable to the law of this land. And so there is a liability within Australia. Those last 2 points I won't develop to any extent, but just to kind of give that fuller understanding of what accountability is. I'm answerable to, I'm responsible for, I'm trustworthy as, and I am liable in. Recruitment, training. So in the resourcing box, so okay, I understand what the expectations are from the council. I accept those expectations. Now the question is, am I resourced to pull that off? If they say to me, Alan, you are responsible for the preaching, teaching ministry of this church, but we're never going to let you stand in the pulpit, I'd push back on that one because I need that platform to execute that expectation. Yes? If we say to somebody, we want you to take the garbage out every Tuesday, but we're not going to give you a key to where the bins are kept, you can't do the job. So resourcing is everything from some budget, some access, right relationships. Am I going to be able to meet with the right people to have the right conversations to move this ministry, this initiative forward? Do I have the resources available? And some of that may go to the point of training. You want me to cast vision in this church? You want me to build culture in this church? You're going to have to fund some attendance at BUV gatherings where I can learn, be equipped to do this kind of stuff. And those are fair dialogue, fair conversations in the context of recruitment, in the context of renewing these things. Does that make sense to us? We need to nail those things down. When you are recruiting somebody and saying, I want you to be accountable to me, you got to work through those resource things. Are we resourcing them to do the job that we're asking them to do? And if I can't resource you for that expectation, then I have to change the expectation to match what I can resource you to do. Make sense? A lot of pastors are trapped in situations where they're not clear what they're responsible for, or worse, they're responsible for something that they're just not resourced to do. And that ends up creating all kinds of dramas. We go around the conversation cycle and we come to review. So at some point in the process, we sit down, and maybe 3 months in, if it's brand new, every 6 months, if it's ongoing, and we ask, how's it going? And so the questions are, what do you see? And a response, here's what I see. So every year, I have a formal performance review with our church council. Every month, I have a meeting with the chair of our church council. And we are always having this review. Annually, it's formal. I fill out forms. All my direct reports fill out forms. All the members of council have opportunity to speak into that, and 2 members of council sit down with me. I fill out a form reflecting on my own ministry. And I say to them, here's what I see. And they say to me, here's what we see. And those review processes keep us going. The monthly catch-up with my chair of church council is so critical, because that's the ongoing, feedback. I have a heavy foot. When I drive on the freeway, I set the automatic speed thing because I can very easily pick up speed and pick up tickets. And it's all a function of, not getting the right feedback. Because when I'm in conversation with you in the front seat, I'm not aware of how fast I'm going. Feedback on that speedometer is such a useful thing to keep it right. Do you have a speedometer for your ministry? Do you have feedback coming into your experience? This is what helps to keep the accountable relationship a friendship, like a son or a daughter. And when there's no feedback and you get dissonance, well, you end up getting a ticket. You end up getting a bad review. You end up getting, and those things can drive disaster. So performance reviews, effective feedback. If we get stuck in this process, back up. If something isn't right in this conversation cycle, you go back to the square before, and can we sort it out there, all the way back to expectations if it isn't solving. The last of the boxes is results. And so results is looking at what's happened against the expectations. And this is well done or not good enough. And here's what happens next. Results is actually evaluating the outcome. In some tasks, this is really easy because you've been recruited to get something from point A to point B. Along the journey, you give some review, and when you get to point B, we sit down and we evaluate the end product, the result, and we say, fantastic, you got it there, you finished the job, well done, step up and we'll give you a more responsible job. That's what the scriptures say, and that's what happens. Or, that was shocking, you didn't get it to point B, and we want to do this again. Do we give you another chance? I don't know. This is where we have the exit line, when we say, not good enough, and frankly, I don't think we can get it to good enough, so we have to have the exit conversation. It's harder to think all this through in a thing like ministry, where there is no point B that we're trying to get everything to. We start at point A, and we try to get to eternity. And it's very difficult to put really absolute markers along the way. We need to figure out how to do it, even if it's artificial, for the sake of our health on these journeys. So what we do here at New Hope is we just put a stake in the ground each year, and we have a performance review for the senior pastor. and we look at the things that were set out as expectations at the beginning of the year, and we have conversations against that, and is it well done, or is it not good enough? And here's what's going to happen. Here's what's going to happen. Could be an exit conversation, or it could be a great celebration, or it could be a restart of the cycle with some new work anchoring the expectations. Okay, that didn't go so well. And it's pretty clear to us that part of the reason is because we didn't define the expectations. We didn't define those clearly. We didn't resource the expectations. So we're going to go around this loop again, and we're going to get this better. When you're having trouble with somebody who's accountable to you, and you think, why won't they, I told them what to do. Why won't they do it? What's their problem? You need to step back and look at the expectations box. Have I communicated expectation to this person who I am holding accountable such that they understand and they accept these expectations? Those are the key words. I've told them, but every time they've gone out of my presence and said to a friend, I have no idea what the heck he's talking about. He uses these big words. I don't know what he wants me to do. I'm afraid to tell him. He's a good bloke. I don't want to upset him, but I don't know what he wants. And the whole thing stalls. So if I'm going to be the person inviting someone into my ministry and holding them accountable, my responsibility is to work it through. Do you understand? And do you accept this expectation? If I'm the one who's being accountable, I'm sitting with my church council. It is my job to keep leaning back saying, now hang on. I'm not sure I just understand what, and this is a group setting, makes it even harder. It's not one opinion, it's 7 opinions. We got to get them melded, which is why my chairman is so important to me. He's the touchstone. It's his interpretation of those meetings. It's his, he's my safety. Make sense to you? He's the one I go through. So if there's a difference of opinion, I say, Richard, you got to sort that out. And you've got to tell me, am I turning left or am I turning right? And I'll be patient. We'll work at it together. But I need to have a clear understanding. And then I need to say, I accept it. That's great. Or, no, I don't accept that. And put my name into the Baptist Union to go find another place to serve. Because that's what accountability is. I know who I'm answerable to, and I know what I'm responsible for. Now, give me the resources. Let's have that dialogue and conversation. You want all of that on that budget? Man, we have a conversation. We align those things. Make sense? Then we move on. Let's have the review. Let's look at the results. And let's have the feedback along the way. And here's what's going to happen next. One of the things that's really helpful in all this is to write this stuff down. Write it down. This is what job specifications and performance reviews are for. We can kind of get lost in all the minutia, but I would actually recommend that for every volunteer in your ministry, everybody who's got a job to do, write it down. At some level, it will seem like, oh, do we have to do all that? Just write it down in simple language and file it somewhere and talk about the resources and just name that and pull it out when you go to talk to them at the 6-month kind of interval and say, this is what we agreed. Yeah. And how's it going? Here's what I see. What do you see? And then results, well done, not so well done. Here's what's going to happen. Do you want to discuss that in any way? Maybe some insight that you've had in these kind of conversations, some stuff you've bumped into? Yeah, shockingly difficult. There are measures of performance, however. It takes a little more work to burrow into what that is. And so things like story in the context of a church environment. Are there stories of lives being affected and being changed? Is actually an important measure. So we often think of the business metrics, which are very counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 happens 6 times. That's good. We were looking for 7. Only 1 short, but that's okay. If you were to try to evaluate an orchestra, what measures would you use for evaluating the effectiveness of an orchestra? Well, you might count things, and this is John Collins' illustration, like standing ovations. You might count things like how many junior orchestras around the country are copying your program. How many times do you get invited back to play? And in ministry, I think we've got to do a similar thing. We've got to work out in our local contexts, what are the measures of this is healthy? So I'm seeking to preach and teach. I'm seeking to develop leadership, so the raising up and oversight of key leadership and mentoring of leadership. I'm seeking to discern and cast vision, and I'm seeking to develop healthy culture. That's my role. So the council has every right, and I have a responsibility to figure out how are we going to measure whether or not that's happening. So are the sermons happening? Do people go around here saying, he's a shocking preacher, can we get him off the platform? Or do they go around saying, that was helpful. My life, I made these decisions. So it's narrative feedback. In the space of vision casting, it's soft measures, but our council are 7 intelligent people. They know whether or not it's happening, and they give that feedback. Does that make sense? And the clearer the expectations are, the easier it is to have the conversations. The more woolly the expectations are, the harder it is. And that's where we get down to review, and there's a form gone out, and all this information's being collected on me now, and everybody has a different opinion on me, and I'm feeling hurt and beat up because they're all measuring against their own standard. And it turns out there isn't one expectation that I was recruited to. There's, 70, 1 for each member, and here we go. Here we go. Any other comment on this conversation? Yeah. I'm going to pass these out. So this is the assessment, and on the reverse side, the action plan, so that you can either listen to me or start to do your own work, whatever is more productive for you. This is just a little tool for you to start to just maybe think through and apply some of this and what's going on for you. So can I just hold your question for 1 second, Gwen, and I'll just speak to this. Yes? Oh. I'll park it there for a minute. Actually, I'll speak to this while this sheet's going out, and then mentoring was the second one. Delegation was the first one. Delegation is one of the most wonderful things that you can do as a leader. And it's hand in glove with mentoring and developing people and helping them. Delegation is not dismissing a responsibility and walking away from it. Delegation is not, I'm tired, you're not doing anything in this evening, you do my work. Delegation is, would you take a journey with me and take up some of the calling that is upon us as a community, and would you allow me to help you be equipped and empowered to do that work? So I think, simplistically, delegation is this cycle. Delegation is sitting down with somebody and saying, here's what this work entails. This is the expectation. Do you understand? Would you accept? Would you like to do that? Delegation is then saying, now, what resources will we need? All right, you've got young kids. You're going to need to fit that into these hours. Can we make, we can make that happen. It would help you if we had a little bit of budget to pay for some babysitting for these evening meetings. We don't have a lot of money, but that we could manage that amount. That's great. Do you see any other impediments? Yep, there's a course coming up. We'll sign you up for that. So it's all that stuff actually sets somebody up. And delegation is about saying, I see in you a future. I see in you capacity. I see in you somebody who can do this work. Here's one of the little things that I hold in the back of my mind with people of promise. I say it eventually, but not in the first conversation. In the back of my mind, I'm saying, I see you leading me. I see you with capacity that grows and widens and your wings spread, and eventually New Hope is too small for you, I see you leading me. And all of that motivates then the way that I invest in or have conversations with or serve that person. Mentoring then is the business of staying with that individual through multiple failures until there are stunning successes. And so to actually see somebody grow forward in their journey, you've got to allow them to have opportunity to fail. And this is why it's so difficult to delegate, because I'm overextended. I need you to take my work and do it as well as I do right now. What, you can't do that? Well, then I'm just not going to delegate you. I'm just going to keep soldiering on. Recipe for disaster and recipe for small kingdom impact. But if I can somehow, find the space to take on somebody who's got to fail a few times before they can succeed. So one of my responsibilities is leadership development and mentoring of leaders. So therefore, I need to say to my council, that means that a part of my time has to be spent nursing failures. Are we all right with that? A part of our church's experience has to be enduring failures, because that's the only way to grow people forward. Now, I'm not talking, I don't mean to be, we don't set people up to fail. We want to set them up to succeed, but there needs to be scope for somebody to kind of grow forward in that. Yes? Yes, so very often, to be a leader is to recognize that you only have some of what's required. If you have everything that's needed, you're in fantasy land. As a leader, you only have some of what is required. And so your job is not to do, your job is to lead. You do to model. You do to be a faithful follower of Jesus. You do because it's right to do. And then added to that, the leadership function of enabling others have the opportunity to do. Now, the beautiful thing is, there's a bunch of stuff I'm not good at, and other people are good at. Just watch this for a minute. Just watch. Is she coming with me? Are you looking at the screens? You see, I'm no good at that task. But Karis is really good at it. And she sits up at the back. You don't even see her. She just follows me. And there we go. And wouldn't it be a foolish thing if I thought, I'm going to give the seminar and run the camera? That'll be cool. They've never seen that before. It'd just be nonsense. But to actually recognize, I'm no good at that. Those awesome people at the back who just make it all happen invisibly until I point it out. You don't even think about it happening. And there it is. To delegate is absolutely to recognize there's a whole lot of stuff that I am not strong at, might not have any idea how to do, but there's people around me who are really good at it, but they need some of my position or my experience or my, the way God has placed me to be enabled to lift and to have some opportunity and to have some space and to grow. On the sheet that I've passed out, just quickly, and then we'll keep conversing, there's an opportunity for you to just name, I am accountable to, and then how clear is that? So when I filled out my version of this, I put church council, and I was able to put a tick right up on the clear space, because it's really clear in our environment. I actually say it every once in a while from the front of the church. I say, church council are my oversight. I report to the church council. We get the church council chair up every once in a while he actually leads kind of the welcome and so on every once in a while in the service. And he introduces himself. I'm, the chair of our church council. And I'll often say, Richard is my boss. And he'll say, I don't like it when Alan calls me his boss. But he is. And we're just clear about that. And it is such a protection for me. It is such a blessing for me for people in the church to know that I'm not some free agent who just gets to do whatever his whim is when he wakes up in the morning. I am an accountable leader. And my council says no to me all the time, because they have a responsibility. I have 1,000 ideas a minute, and they have to kind of help, sort and sift. And they perform a very useful amazing role. I am responsible for, so I was able to kind of name the things there, and I feel quite clear about that. It did prompt in my mind as I filled it out, I must just at council name those things again and see what feedback I get. You know, we've had some changes on church council. That's clear to me. I wonder if they all would give that 100% tick. Must have that conversation again in the council meeting. I am appropriately resourced. I feel rather blessed in that journey. I am appropriately reviewed. What would you say? Is it inadequate or excellent? And then the environment questions. So, is there candor, trust, responsiveness, and fairness where you are seeking to be accountable? And I've written, I feel. It's your feelings that will tell you how good this is. It's if you feel, oh, I'm comfortable in that accountable relationship, or I feel shut down, or I feel like I have to be very careful what I say, note that and explore that in prayer and reflect on that. And what is that telling you? And then your own person. So am I trustworthy, solution-focused, full of integrity? What do I see when I look in the mirror? Am I the person that I want to be relative to this accountable relationship? And what do I think others would say? What do I think others would say about me? What do they say when I'm not in the room? You know, what do I think they would, how would they really evaluate my character? If that's a little uncomfortable, I still need to go there. And the best way to know what others see is to ask them. Ask those who are trying to work with you, what do you see? Where am I really an asset for you? And where am I just making it hard for you? Tell me what you see. And that feedback can be invaluable. This is an assessment. You don't have to show this to anybody. You don't have to even make a mark on the page. You can do it in your head. But I'd encourage you to assess that relationship, that upward accountability relationship. What's going on there? And as you answer those questions, it will tell you something about the health. And then if you flip it over, as the actions, I'd encourage you to just think about some next steps. So who do I need to talk to, and what do I need to say? Do you need to sit down with your chairperson of the body that oversees you as a pastor and say, oh, look, I did this exercise, and I'm feeling pretty good, but there's one member of this council that I feel all bent out of shape when I know they're going to come to the meeting. You know, oh, okay, what? Get it on the table. Get it out there. Or I love this council. I love this gathering. You know, until we get to this particular ministry, and I just feel like you guys all turn on me. What is there something I'm not understanding here? To have conversations. Who do I need to talk to? What do I need to say? What do I need to say to myself? It's possible that as you do this evaluation, you know, there's some triggers in your own mind. If you do not know what you're responsible for, do not choose the victim behavior. Do not wait and see. Do not say, I can't. Do not spiral down into unconsciousness. If you think, honestly, I don't think this church knows what I am here to do, or the council or deacons are clear. I don't even know if I'm clear. Okay, great. Now you got some work to do to actually articulate that. Here's what I'd ask myself. What do I want to do? What do I think God called me to do? What did I get into this to do? And name it at that level. And then what actions do I need to take and when? Okay, I haven't had this conversation with myself. I need to schedule with the council, you know, some time to just sit. I want to ask the chairman, can I have a half an hour for them to discuss 4 ideas that I'm going to table? This is what I think I'm supposed to be doing. What do you guys think? What other actions do you need to take? Is there somebody that needs to be cycled off of your leadership group? Or if you're thinking about downward accountability relationships, you know, do we need to go and clarify expectations and resources? Do we have good review processes? Is it happening? Or if I just set them on autopilot, they do a great job. Every once in a while I applaud them. Turns out they're out there dying on the vine because I have never actually sat with them and got feedback. And then this time next year, so you might even want to start with number 4 and do the whole thing backwards. This time next year I will feel. This time next year, I will see. So this time next year, I will feel ecstatic when I read my diary and say, hey, deacon's meeting tonight. You beauty. Love those people. Love sitting with those people. Now, I can honestly tell you that when I see council meeting on my diary, it's a good day. I enjoy meeting with my council. It's not because they always agree with me. We just went through this question of, shall we vote for Simon Carey Holt? Were some of you delegates? And I'm thinking, all right, we'll have the conversation at council. Whew. Wow, my word, we're all over the map. Yes, we are. But it's great. We can talk together. We can have a relationship. We can own it. We can hear from one another. And we can discern. And we can keep moving forward. This time next year, I will see. So what are you going to see when you look in the mirror? What are you going to see about your own person? How are you going to actually kind of relate to your own character? What's going to happen in and for you? I encourage you to just use that sheet to reflect on your most significant accountable relationship. There's some things you can do to really move it to where it needs to be. You can use the same sheet to think about someone who's accountable to you. Just kind of change the verbiage a little bit. Or you can give this sheet to someone who's accountable to you and say, have a go. Be as harsh as you like. And then we'll sit down and we'll have a chat about it and see if we can't improve these relationships, these engagements, so that we can look at one another and say, I don't call you a servant. I don't have servants in this church. I don't want to have servants. I don't really want to have staff. I want to have friends. I want to have colleagues in the ministry. And I'd love to have some sons and daughters on the journey where there's sowing into their lives and investing in them. And I'd like for some of them to become my mother in the journey of leadership as we kind of break the metaphor down and work it to death. That we actually have this sense of accountability as a beautiful thing that we share that enables the work that we do together. Now, any questions? We've got just a couple of seconds. Yes. Yeah. I'd never asked the congregation. I think it's a great question. Expectations will always outstrip capacity. And so it's about taking the unrealistic expectations that sit there and discerning what are the expectations that we are agreed on. And so if the congregation has these expectations, and if the council in my universe says, yep, that's the expectation, and if the chairman said, yep, that's it, no, that's what we want. We want you to work, 8 days every week. That's what we want. Then I need to decide, am I in the wrong place? Like this, they're nuts. They're crazy. I need, however, not to just sit in the victim posture. I need to lean back in, and I need to teach. And I need to, help them see. I need to say, you know what, guys? Those are crazy expectations. And here's a few things about me. When you're lying in the hospital and you don't feel so hot, you don't really want me coming in to see you, because I'm not going to make you feel any better. That is not my gifting. But we've got some people in the church for whom that's really their gifting. And we've got some people who can train those people. And we've got some stuff we can do here. Let me lead that. Let me work with those trainers. Let me build up that group of people. Let me go over here and work with the people who are putting vision and future into our young people. Let me work with them. Let me work with the people who have an evangelistic heart and get them going. If you let me do those things, and just stop asking me to go visit the hospital every Monday for a day, I think I could serve you well. But if that vision, if what I just said is like you think, no, that's rubbish, I'm probably not your guy. So I think we teach in this space. I think we recognize that expectations are as wide as all get out, and from each individual's point of view, they're valid expectations. Like, they feel right. But I need somehow to work. So who am I answerable to? And what am I responsible for? And do I understand that? And do I accept that? And then how am I resourced to do that? Great. Now we can go. And when those things aren't in place, well, recruitment hasn't, the whole kind of call, engagement, it's not healthy. If you find yourself in a situation where, this is all great, but I'm not being recruited, I've been there for 5 years, and the longer I've been there, the more, expectations have gone like this. Well, I would suggest that you ask yourself, well, who am I answerable to? Is that the deacons? Okay. Let's set some time aside. Say to them, we need to have some conversations around this so that we can get the expectations really, really right. And the truth of the matter is, if you're expected to do only a few things, but you're good at those things, you will bless that church. You will bless that church, that ministry. You'll bless it in amazing ways. And it's the deep challenge. Like, I know how hard this is, because in ministry, we want to do everything. Sometimes the problem's with me. I don't want to disappoint anybody. But I have learned that I have to. I have to kind of work out some expectations that we can agree on, that I can accept, and it's very key that I accept them. Because if I say, okay, all right, whatever, but I haven't really accepted them in my heart, then the accountability thing is never going to work. I'm going to feel like a slave. That's what I'm going to feel like. I'm going to function like a slave, and it's all going to be bad. So it's in that acceptance space, where we work it through, where I get up in the morning and I say, I can do this. By the grace of God, they're asking me to do some stuff that I believe God's going to enable me to do. That's what makes ministry exciting. Enough. Good? Thanks, David. Yeah. This time next year. TTYN, this time next year. What's your plan for this time next year? What are you going to feel? What are you going to see as you have the governance and accountability conversation with yourself and others? David.